with all of us.
Their principal. Welcome, everyone. This is the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission's April 25th meeting. On the agenda tonight, which has been revised, we have items of interest from commissioners, director's report. That will be followed by the consent agenda that has consideration of the minutes from April 11th. Then the solid waste and recycling rates briefing, and DOZA, Design Overlay Zone Assessment briefing. For those who, yes, they may have been here, doesn't look like it, for the Rothko Pavilion, we had scheduled a briefing for maybe the rest of the commission too, with an opportunity for public comment on the Portland Art Museum's Rothko Pavilion. At last week's city council hearing, Commissioner Saltzman asked to have the Rothko Pavilion ordinance returned to his office, which means there will be no vote on it, and it's no longer a live item before council. A little background: about 26 people testified, and it was overwhelmingly negative towards the Art Museum's notion of enclosing the walkway and limiting access to museum hours. Therefore, we kind of in quick consultation amongst ourselves on the leadership, decided to postpone the briefing until it's more clear how the proposal will proceed. So that's an update on that.
Yeah, I do hope we'll put in our marker that if there is a revised proposal, that they schedule time where we can look at it before it goes to council.
I would agree. So, and there are other items of interest from commissioners. Yes, Andre.
Jill Zinder offered my services to attend the Oregon chapter of American Planning Association meeting on May 20th. I'll be part of a forum on leadership role of planning commissioners. It's a 1-hour session, and it will include people from Lane County, Deschutes County, obviously City of Portland, and Central Point Planning Commissioner, talking about leadership on planning processes.
Fabulous. Thanks for doing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And then you'll report back all you learned?
Yeah.
Good. Any other items? No? Okay, director's report, Susan?
Just a few items. First, lots of action at council this week. We've been running over to City Hall a couple times a day. We had a work session this morning on equity and diversity issues. It was sort of a 5-year check-in really on the Portland plan that was adopted in 2012, and soon after, as you'll remember, the Office of Equity and Human Rights was established. A great discussion, included 5 or 6 bureau directors, 5 or 6 equity staff, lots of discussion with council on what's working, what's not working, and we all recognize there's a long way to go, both internally and in the way that we do our work in the community, but we also recognize some successes. One of those that I wanted to mention is that we have moved from 18% to almost 25% people of color in the city's workforce overall in just 5 years. So in terms of hiring very qualified people, but being able to look more broadly and getting a much broader pool of applicants was basically how that happened. We were able to achieve that. So that's a great thing. So that was this morning. Tomorrow we will take the design overlay zone assessment report to council. The Bureau of Development Services will be joining us. You'll hear more about that today. Then on Thursday we take the climate action plan report to council. It describes all the work that we've done since that plan was adopted in 2015. So it's just a 2-year report. City's overall success is now at 21% reduction in carbon emissions citywide, and that's at the same time that our population has increased by 1/3 and jobs have gone up 25%. So jobs and population have increased a lot since the early 90s, and our carbon emissions have gone in the other direction. So once again, showing we can do that, and it's not impossible, and but we have a long way to go there too. Also wanted to mention that last night, I don't know, have any of you gone to Design Week? So it's over in the Central East Side at the Red. It's going on for 2 more days, I believe. And it's featuring the Green Loop, part of a big component of the Central City Plan. We did a presentation last night, which was, I kicked it off, just describing what the Green Loop is. And then we had 7 or 8 different presenters all doing 5 minutes on, Kimberly Branham did what's going to happen at the post office, and Charlene Zidell did what's going to happen at Zidell, and all of the different properties along, the major properties along the loop. So it was pretty fun and pretty exciting. We talked a lot about how the Green Loop is not just a large civic infrastructure project where the city's going to come in with $2 billion and build this thing, but that it's going to rise organically and be very different all along the route, and that as part of that it's really becoming sort of a movement and a campaign as much as anything in order to inspire people to begin to do this kind of design work and make the necessary investments. And when you have a campaign in Portland and you really arrive, you get a beer named after you. So we now have the Green Loop beer, Green Loop IPA. I actually went and got a t-shirt made last night and I wore it. It's hanging on my wall now. I'll bring it down. And maybe I'll be able to get a couple samples to bring here at another time after the meeting. But it was really exciting, and it totally happened without us. Like, we just found out about it. We didn't go and ask these people to do this. So I'm hearing more and more from people all over the central city that are in any way kind of touching the loop, saying they kind of want to be a part of this thing, but we don't really know exactly what it is yet. And I think that's the best thing you can have going on. So lots more about the Green Loop in future meetings. And finally, some logistics. Our May, June, July, and August meetings will be held next 2 doors down at CH2M. They're going to be remodeling this room, so it'll be on the first floor. It's called the Lincoln Room. We'll put up big signs here because we'll all forget and come here anyway on the first couple meetings, and it'll tell us to go over there, and Julie will definitely send reminders. I think that's it. Any questions? The mayor is going to take control of all of the bureaus on the 27th, I believe, and his budget will come out May 1st. So we already report to the mayor, so nothing new for us, but it always causes some interesting times for a week or 2 or 3 while that goes on. So that's the update. Yes. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Susan. Next item is the consent agenda, consideration of the minutes from April 11th. Do I have a motion?
Move adoption?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, so that passes. And very exciting next item, solid waste and recycling rates. That was not sarcasm, it is exciting. So Bruce and Michael, and you're going to set the stage for what we get to do very quickly, aren't you?
Exactly. All right, Chair Schultz, members of the commission, I'm Michael Armstrong. I manage the sustainability programs for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. With me is Bruce Walker, who runs our solid waste and recycling programs. And also with us is Ariane Sperry, who knows all the details of the rate making behind this. So depending on your questions, we may drag her up here as well. As you suggested, so we have a preliminary briefing for you today, a little bit kind of remind you of the regulatory construct here and the pieces that will then come to you in pretty quick succession in early May. And we'll explain why this window is as tight as it is. Do you have a question? Can you not hear me? Maybe closer? It sounds loud to me.
I can
Okay.
hear you, but it might be, I had that happen to me like last week. I think there's certain spots in here that have weird acoustics.
Let me know if I start to fade. Okay, so we're going to talk through residential rates. And so just as a reminder and for viewers, Portland's regulatory structure for overseeing solid waste collection falls very cleanly into 2 categories. Commercial, and you see the way the system works outlined on the side there, but it's important to note that commercial includes businesses and also multifamily properties with 5 or more units. And so in the commercial world, commercial and multifamily world, customers get to choose their own hauler. the city has lengthy rules for what needs to be collected and how that collection happens. We also provide assistance to businesses and multifamily properties that are looking to increase recycling. And then we receive a per ton fee for garbage that's collected from those, but we do not set rates. So on the commercial side of the house, it's a free market. Businesses get to negotiate with their hauler for the best rate they can. What we'll be talking to you mostly today is on what we call the residential curbside side of this, which is single houses up through fourplexes. And for residential, we have the city divided up into geographic territories, which are served by, each of which is served by a single hauler through a franchise arrangement. Similarly to the commercial side, we have rules about what that collection looks like. We assist individual residents, but on the residential side, we set the rates, and that's a big part of what we will be laying out for you and that we will ask you to make a recommendation to City Council about. In terms of revenues that come to the city, on the residential side, there's a 5% of revenue that comes to the city to administer the programs to support waste reduction, recycling, composting, and also deal with the administration and regulation of the haulers. So that's the general setup of the system. We're now going to talk through in more detail the residential side of this. And so I'm going to turn it over to Bruce to talk through how we go about setting the rates.
Thank you, Michael. So we provided a background document for your review that I'm not going to go through in, page by page or each paragraph, but I want to hit some high points of how we step through our rate review process. We require financial reports from the haulers every year. Those are reviewed by our contractor, a certified public accountant who reviews not only for the operating allowable costs that are submitted, but the reasonableness of those costs, how they relate to the size of that operation, so that we get a good sense of what the actual costs of this system is, because there are 14 different service providers that are franchisees who offer the service. We review those rates, and then in the calculation that goes forward for the upcoming rate year, which would begin in July, and we'll show the different rate components. There's an addition of the 5% franchise fee that Michael referred to, as well as an opportunity for the haulers to earn 9.5 operating margin. That's the target that we shoot for when we set these rates. It's not guaranteed, but that's how the haulers are, or that's how we review costs, and the system is set up around that construct. When we review the rates, I'm simplifying now to say, what are some of the key cost factors that we saw this year? Obviously, labor and fuel are big factors. The truck costs, truck purchase costs, for the service provision, we've adjusted those going forward with some inflation costs. But the reminder is, we're not just adjusting the rates you adopted last year. Instead, it's those actual costs that the haulers incur over the course of the year. So it's to their interest to be as efficient as possible, to earn more. But when they do, when we come again, we've set a new platform with any increased efficiencies that they have. We capture that in the ongoing or the annual rate review. Labor and fuel costs, I'll show, there's not substantial changes. Garbage disposal costs, we look at those both on where do haulers take that material. It goes to Metro. Metro transfer stations actually are going to have a slightly lower tip fee over the course of the coming year, and we factor that in. At the same time, we measure can weights to get a variation between the, we don't actually go out and do that. However, we have a contractor with Portland State University that some of those students are up earlier than my college days when they're out at the start of those routes at 6 a.m. weighing garbage cans of the various sizes from a mini can up to a 90-gallon cart. So we can get that variation and incorporate those disposal components. So that's included in the cost. Yard debris and food scraps is an increasingly important part of our program in terms of recovery. We shifted in late 2011 to include food scraps in our compost cart. We also moved that cart to a weekly collection basis. So the good news is Portland residents continue to put out and are increasingly using the compost cart. There is a slight increase in the tip fee at Metro. That's where it's taken, and it's really being passed along from Metro at their, because they distribute that material from a transfer station to privately operated compost facilities. Finally, a major component in the summary is recyclable material sales revenue. So in the past, we've been able to really deduct that off the haulers, the anticipated costs. Unfortunately, the last couple of years, markets have not been strong for the material. So in other words, it's not the revenue generator that it was in the past. And while that was very modest, it was important for us to recognize that revenue flows into the system. There is still beneficial use of the materials. It's just that it's a commodity, and those prices have dropped. The examples of using particularly paper fiber here in cardboard boxes, grocery bags, those are made in Oregon, and they go back to Oregon mills, particularly in Springfield. There's a box plant in Beaverton. So they're Oregon mills that make those products. So I don't want the assumption that, oh, that stuff's not worth much. Should we keep doing it? Of course you should do it. There's environmental benefits, but the material sales revenue is not strong. And I just wanted to give an indication that it's affected by international markets. I'm not going to go into all those details, but be aware that the large impact from China is felt here on some of the prices that are paid for the materials. So let's move to say, okay, Bruce, you've laid out a range of the key cost factors. What does that mean? So if we,
Big reveal.
so with that, we are ready. We are proposing through our analysis that there is a slight increase, less than 1%, for our most commonly used service level. About 44% of the customers use a 35-gallon roll cart, garbage roll cart. Now, this includes every other week garbage, weekly recycling, weekly composting, food scraps, and yard debris. And then there are other charges there that I can refer to. But you see very minimal cost increases, even with upward pricing on fuel, upward inflationary prices in other cost elements, so that I think it reflects very strongly on haulers' drive for greater efficiencies. And I think that's a real positive in our system. Where you see the biggest increase, and it's barely a blip, is the slight increase in the composting costs, and some of that's attributed to higher costs of sending it to compost facilities. And what we see is a minor, we're proposing a minor 10 cent per month increase in the rates. So it's, as our Bureau Director asked me today, well, how would that compare to rates, say, 5 years ago? You mean it's still, with this slight increase, it's lower than it was in 2012. So it's, I think when we put this in context, it reflects well on the system we have and how we try to capture those efficiencies and savings that the haulers have every year. And that even with inflationary pricing increase or upward pressure, if you will, we are seeing a very modest, slight rate increase this year. And that's the main, I guess, takeaway from where we are today, or where we are. I'd like to, before answering questions, just say, where do we go with this? Because we're going to be back here shortly with you. On the 9th, we intend to come back and propose the full rates. We're still doing some minor analysis on some of the other rate categories. We have a very extensive rate sheet that we provide to City Council for everything from, like I mentioned earlier, the mini can to the 90-gallon cart, but also the services that are provided to duplexes and other duplex, triplex, fourplex. So there's a pretty comprehensive list of material or rates that we develop. We are finalizing those. We will be back with this body, and we'll be seeking a recommendation to pass that along to our City Council when the rate hearing is convened at Council on the 18th. So that's our schedule. I've tried to be, believe it or not, brief as I've gone through the highlights of the 3-page memo that we shared with the group. So with that.
Appreciate the brevity. Thank you. Are there questions? Go ahead, Teresa.
So good job on all the trash management. But I just have a question. Do we have any programs for just reducing the amount of trash, not related to cost factors, but just sustainability factors?
So you're looking at a broader look, more aligned with a climate action approach. So I would say very definitely we have that. We have outreach components that are and by that I mean community outreach, working with various groups, presentations in the community. We also are very active in our work in trying to figure out some of the next steps on communicating, not just what to do with it at the end of life, but are there ways to change how we can communicate about purchasing and about some wise next steps with being resourceful in our alignment of what you're getting at is why get it in the first place if it's just going to end up for disposal?
Eli, and then Chris, and then Andre.
Okay. I may be looking ahead a little bit to the next meeting where you adjust the costs based on providing some incentives for less trash generation. But I'm just looking at the current rates and wondering why the 35-gallon cart is the sweet spot. And I would posit one guess is that the cart smaller than it is 65 cents less, and the one larger than it is $5.85 more. And people might say, even though the one smaller than it is just 3 gallons less, and the one bigger than it is 25 gallons more, there might be just some basic social psychology which is driving people to that size more so than how large the family is or how much trash they generate. And that if that's the case, there may be some just basic psychology that could go into setting the structures. Because when I call about what trash rate is, I'm always asking what's it cost to get a little bit bigger one, a little bit smaller one. That informs my decision on it. I wonder if a lot of people do the same thing, and that might be a strategy in the allocation of cost to provide an incentive to go for smaller systems. Because right now, you get the best deal per gallon hauled by getting the biggest roll cart right now. And that's probably always going to be the case for efficiency of the system. So I guess that's a question, is whether you look at things like that to provide an incentive for people to actually look at the marginal difference between cost and go for the smaller one.
All three of us are going to jump in. Ready?
You go.
So I think those are great observations. So a couple things. One is that the 32-gallon can, which you see on the rate list, but actually is not, you can't sign up for that new. It's only people who have had that who can keep it. If you're signing up new, you have to go with one of the carts. We're trying to move toward a fully carted system. I think that, the psychology is really compelling. One of the tough things about this is that we are all pretty oriented to the different sizing of the garbage container, but the reality is that the garbage is picked up, once every 2 weeks. The other carts are picked up every week, and so the garbage piece is actually a relatively minor component of the overall stack, and so it's easy for it to look like that's the service you're paying for. It's actually just kind of a marginal change on the edge, and so the psychology is still powerful, but when you look at what's driving the rates, and we do, as we talked about last year, we'll talk about again in 2 weeks, we do include incentives to try to broaden that spread and send a stronger signal, but there are some limits to how far we would suggest pushing that given the costs.
So I think the only thing I'd add is in some cities, they've done things like double the cost if you go to the 60 or 90-gallon cart to get people to not use that size cart. And what we've done is just added a couple dollars and then subtracted a couple dollars down on the other end to get people to go to the 20. Because if you just do it by cost of service, it ends up,
Really
it's
flat,
pretty
yeah.
flat because it's such a small, like he was saying, like such a small part of it. The other reason that we haven't done that in the past is there's sort of an equity issue. Many times, people who have a larger cart may have 7 or 8 people in their house or 10 people in their house. And those are the people that are using still the 60 and 90-gallon carts. And so that's not true for all of them, but it is true for some large households. So that's sort of where we are.
Well, just in case people think that these briefings have no impact, I want you all to know that after last year's briefing, I called and I got a 35-gallon cart because I learned that the cart is more efficient on the system.
And Bruce got me composting.
But what I want to know is why you didn't get the 20-gallon. I mean,
It doesn't matter if
3
he doesn't fill it
kids,
up.
20 gallons for the month. Like, we could do it.
Andre? I think.
Great presentation. You piqued my interest when you said the trend is downward over the last 5 years. So is it possible when we come back the 9th, we could actually see that trend and maybe a graph or something? Because I think that's a powerful message, even though we may be up 10 cents or whatever, that the trend is telling folks, hey, there is a benefit here over time. And from that standpoint, I think that's great.
Gary?
A couple of comments. First of all, just an overall compliment. I think you guys have done a great job in really dialing in the economics of this and being able to, create fees that are essentially stable in a non-inflationary environment is what would be expected and is good. So kudos to you on that. The question I have about trash reduction, and this is anecdotal, but in my household, we have a great decrease in garbage since the food scraps can be incorporated into the yard debris. So that's been really helpful. I think the next frontier is plastic. And even though we're very conscientious about trying not to purchase plastic or otherwise obtain it, we end up with a multi-gallon can of plastic materials every month or so that we have to haul off to a different recycler. And so I was wondering if you have any thoughts about expanding the degree of plastic collection in the system. And I realize there's market factors, but I'd like to hear some comments on what you think.
We are looking at that, but the primary concern we have right now is some of those plastics that are being generated that are not part of the curbside program have marginal markets, and many of those are shipped offshore to China. And there's a question because some cities have added that material, and now there's difficulties for them marketing that material, some of those types of plastics. So we recognize the responsibility we carry is when we make a step forward and add something, we essentially know it's not going to come back out of the cart, say in 2 years if something's uncertain. So you are spot on. We get calls in that every week in our office. Gosh, what could we do? Is there more places to take plastics? So we would like to offer that opportunity, but we're also cognizant just of the challenges with finding a home for it.
And I forgot my last question, but let me go back to it. When you were here last year, we talked about new entrants into the franchise market and particularly trying to open up the door for minority-owned businesses to get into the franchise system. And I believe I remember that that issue is under exploration. I was wondering if you can give us any kind of update about what, if anything's happening with that.
So over the course, we have a 10-year franchise agreement that was entered into, the effective date was early 2013, February 2013. We have a midpoint review of that franchise agreement that will set course to take a look at the issue you just raised, as well as the performance, the overall performance of that system. We are slated to begin that later this spring. We needed to wrap up the rate review because this is a pretty intensive, short timelines to get back to council. So the short answer is we will be back with a beginning discussion of franchise review with this broader group in 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere in that time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Andre?
There's another part that, thank you, Gary, for bringing that up. I remiss and forgot about it. But the incentives around, you said the haulers have incentives for efficiencies. Are those incentives, I mean, we get the benefit of that in our rates, but are there specific incentives to address, to get more people on the 35-gallon or that rate haulers do, or is this just kind of, we make more right turns so we're more efficient and we use less fuel type thing, or is it actual, we're going to customers that have 32 gallons and saying we're going to give them a discount or something to get them on the cart versus their 32-gallon can?
Yeah, so to date, we have not included an incentive for the haulers to move customers to the 35-gallon carts. We have kind of narrowed that gap between the 32-gallon can and the 32-gallon carton to avoid people sort of making the observation that Eli pointed out, which is that, gee, it seems like.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of an incentive, but we haven't structured an incentive for the haulers. And that's something that we have discussed in past years. And the can question it's one that is going away slowly as people's cans wear out, or as new customers come into the system, they can only get carts. I think there's a question about, is that kind of natural attrition fast enough, or should we introduce an incentive or simply do away with the cans? And those are conversations we've had. We certainly can revisit here. And the haulers have a perspective on that for sure.
Eli?
Okay, since I'm thinking about gaming the system, could a group of 8 neighbors team up and get a commercial service? Because I just ran the numbers and it would be pretty cost effective to do so and bid it out. I live in a community with 16 homes. We have a commercial service because that's our choice, right? And our rates are more like $670 per month because we're sharing cans and hiring a commercial service on the market. Could a group of homeowners or renters do that themselves, or the regulations kind of say, if it looks like a single-family house, feels like a single-family house, you got to be part of the residential system?
The latter. I mean, essentially, it's defined, so it would be based on tax lot. And so if it's a single structure on a tax lot, then there's you wouldn't be able to have commercial service, right? And one other thing, just since you brought up renters, there's a requirement that the property owner pay for the service. And we work with BDS, or that we have an interagency with them to carry out some of the enforcement actions to make sure that the renters get the right level of garbage, recycling, and composting service. So there's a protection, if you will, for renters that we strive for.
Any other questions? I'm gonna, just because I think it's beneficial for others to hear, ask a question that we asked in the briefing, or I asked in the briefing, which is, in other hearings, we've heard that a 9.5% of return profit margin seems pretty high for some people. I'm not going to point out what those hearings were. So anyway, could you just explain for the benefit of everybody kind of how that's arrived at and why that's the number you use, and so that the public understands that?
Right. So a 9.5 target, 9.5% target operating margin was developed 20 plus years ago when we did a survey of industry standards, if you will, what other cities provide in agreements, similar type management agreements. This is pre-tax target margin, and so we have looked at it we've looked at it at each franchise review. We would assume it would be part of the next franchise review, which Mr. Oxman asked about the timing of. So that would be part of a consideration, though the range that's been in place throughout this state is somewhere in the 8 to 12% range. Other utilities have, non-garbage utilities have some rate or target operating margins that are similar.
Thank you. Any other questions from anybody?
Just to confirm, that margin would be part of the rate review coming up in the future, latter part of the year, correct? Franchise review, correct? Okay, great.
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you very much, Michael and Bruce. Appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you back soon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Design Overlay Zone Assessment, also called or known as DOZA. This is a briefing, and Laura and Mark, if you could come up. welcome.
Thank you. Hi. Laura Lillard, the project manager for the Design Overlay Zone Assessment. I also want to acknowledge my project team. The DOZA is a partnership between the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and the Bureau of Development Services. We have Sandra Wood, Phil Namany, and Love Johnson from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And also helping us with this project is Cara Fioravanti, who manages design review and historic resource review, as well as Stacy Monroe and Jean Hester, all from BDS. And then I'd like to introduce from the consultant team, the lead on this project, Mark Hinshaw from the Seattle office of Portland-based Walker Macy. I was afraid I was going to flip those two. The feature of this presentation is really just going over the recommendations from the DOZA report that we had a DOZA subcommittee from the planning and from this commission discuss at length. And so before I get into that, I'd like to just do a really quick brief overview just to set the context for the assessment and to give us a baseline for what the parameters are for this project. So design overlay zone applies to some areas of the city, and I will show you a map in a minute here. This is the purpose statement. The current purpose statement for the design overlay zone is for areas of the city with special scenic, architectural, or cultural value, promoting conservation, enhancement, vitality, and ensuring that certain types of development will be compatible with the neighborhood and enhance the area. The design overlay zone has evolved through the years. In the 2000s, with the Gateway Plan District, that last phrase was added to just reflect that we are also applying design overlay in areas that are targeted for growth and high density development, in that case near transit stations. And this map also shows sort of where we apply design overlay. So you can see in the red there, the central city. It applies to 75% of the central city. So what the areas that you're not seeing are industrial zone, and we do not have design overlay on industrial zones. The area in pink is Gateway, and those two mandate discretionary design review currently. And then we also have in blue other areas outside of the central city and Gateway that also have design overlay. And those are results of plan districts for the purpose of preserving character, similar to the sort of purpose statement that I read earlier. And in some cases, there are areas where the design overlay just recognizes the high growth potential, like Interstate, St. John's, Hollywood, and the like. You're also seeing on the map that there are areas that are hatched. You can, I don't know if this works. There we go. So you can see areas along Killingsworth, Alberta, Burnside, Division, Hawthorne, Belmont, there, that's the right order. And then Midway, some areas in Lentz and West Portland. And you can also see from our comprehensive plan, we have our town centers circled. The areas that are hatched are from the expansion, the proposed expansion of design overlay from the mixed use zones project. And that was in recognition that we are targeting areas for growth that didn't have design overlay zone. And so it seemed appropriate that those would, like Hollywood and St. John's and Interstate, also get design overlay. So we also have a two-track system. And the approval criteria and the purpose, not the purpose statement, actually the purpose statement is the same for both, but the public noticing requirements are very different for each. And as I mentioned before, in Central City and Gateway, we require discretionary design review. All of the areas in blue outside of the Central City and Gateway, we have the potential option for a clear and objective track. So on the left-hand side, the review criteria are design guidelines. They are flexible, they require judgment, they're subjective statements, whereas on the right-hand side, the clear and objective track are design standards found in the zoning code, 33218, they're objective criteria, and you either do or you do not meet them. And here's just for kicks an example of, on the left-hand side, you can see the design guidelines very qualitative statements. These are regulations. You must show that you meet them. And then on the right-hand side, it's a lot more clear whether or not you do or do not meet them. It's a check. This chart shows just over the last, or I guess from 2013 to 2015, permits in the category of triplexes, apartments, condominiums, townhouses, and other commercial projects. It doesn't include historic landmarks or historic districts. But what we're showing here is that a majority of the discretionary permits are within the central city, and then there are a few in Gateway as well. Outside of the central city and Gateway, we see about a 60-40 split of which projects go through discretionary and which choose the clear and objective track. And the other thing to note with this chart is that in orange, you can see those are the projects that are new construction. And so what we're seeing is a majority of the permits coming in under D overlay, at least in those 3 years that we captured, were alterations and additions. So that fed a little bit into the consultant's recommendations. So what is DOZA? It is, we decided that we needed to evaluate what is working and what is not within our design overlay zones and recommend ways to improve our system and tools. We thought after the comprehensive plan and expanding design overlay and the Central City 2035 plan that this was a good time to do that and see how we could better meet the goals in policies in those plans. And we're asking the following questions that you can see there. How can our design review process and tools evolve to better respond to our changing development environment? And what kinds of improvements could be recommended? And we felt that as two bureaus that are very vested in design overlay, and there are a lot of stakeholders in the process, architects, developers, property owners, business and neighborhood associations, that it was best to do this with an independent consultant. And so we are lucky that we have Mark, and we've had a long process this is about a year in the making. And I also just wanted to acknowledge that we have had members of this commission participate on a subcommittee to help us sort of tease out some of the opportunities in the recommendations that the consultant team put forward. So thank you all for providing your lens with the goals and policies from the Climate Action Plan, the Portland Plan, the Comprehensive Plan to this project. Many of these recommendations will follow under your purview, like code changes such as the thresholds and design standards. So it's a really important work, and we look forward to working with you as we move through the recommendations. So here's where we are in the process. Like I said, this is sort of following a year-long journey. We asked the consultant team to look at peer cities and give us sort of what other cities, how other cities use their own version of design overlay and how that's applied and what sort of the lessons we can glean from that. We also the consultant team did a round of interviews with dozens of stakeholders, neighborhood and business associations inside and outside of the central city, including Gateway, developers, architects, design commissioners. Some of you were involved in a roundtable. We had an equity focus group, affordable housing providers, as well as staff. We set out a questionnaire sent to the last 5 years of applicants and neighborhood associations and business associations with design overlay, as well as site evaluations for about 70 plus sites spread throughout the city, including areas that don't have design overlay but will get design overlay with the proposed expansion. So this resulted in pages and pages of research and findings, and that's found in your appendix. I think it's 300 pages long. And in December, we presented the findings and preliminary recommendations to this body, and then a few of you volunteered to be on a subcommittee. And in January, we got together with a work session to sort of flesh out some of the recommendations that you all wanted to comment on. And then there was a joint commission briefing with the Design Commission and members of that subcommittee in early February to provide feedback to the consultant team and hear from each other. And I do want to note that as part of that, both commissions recommended that we speak with the Historic Landmarks Commission. And we did that in March, and we also were able to get their feedback. They've written a letter to council for this project as well. So before we go into the recommendations, I just want to give you a quick snapshot of our anticipated work plan post-DOZA. We plan on taking the next couple of weeks to dive a little bit deeper into the work plan than this slide shows, but we think some of the process improvements that don't need a code change, we can go ahead and start now, and in fact, many of them are underway. And then the tools recommendations, updating the guidelines and standards and adjusting the threshold will take, at least 18 months because they're legislative projects, and so they require a little bit more public outreach and some fine-tuning. We anticipate, based on the recommendations from our consultant team, that we would tackle the community design guidelines and community design standards that apply outside of the central city and gateway before we move on to central city. So I don't know if there's any questions about anything I've presented so far. Okay. So I thought maybe we could have Mark go through the recommendations that were of interest to the subcommittee. You all have, I think, received a letter today from the subcommittee to council. So if you have that in front of you, maybe we could just go through. I have the, as you know, the recommendations were divided into process recommendations and tools recommendations. So in front of you, I have an outline of the process recommendations, and this is a little hard to see, but we can maybe go over just the ones that were pertinent to the subcommittee and have Mark maybe go through those, and then you all can sort of give your what you put in your letter. Does that sound like a okay approach?
Yeah, no, it sounds like a great approach. And just a little bit of background in working with the team. Since in general, we were supportive of all recommendations, and we could probably, some of us, like me, could talk about these things all night long. I thought it would probably be best just to focus on the recommendations that the subcommittee had and why we had, why we felt they were important points of conversation for us to have. And certainly at the end of that, if there's other topics you guys want to talk about, we could go there. But they also, to this point, it's these recommendations that were helping to inform the letter that's going to council. So that's why I thought it was really important for us to basically focus on those.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mark. And
Sure. Well, I just wanted to actually say, before I get into the meat of it, that this has been a personally fascinating and rewarding process for me. I've been involved in one aspect of design review or another for the last 35 years, either as an architect presenting in front of a board, or as an administrator of a design review process working for cities, or as a consultant advising cities on their design review process and their design standards, or as a testifier in court cases dealing with design review, and then finally as an author on the subject of design review. So all those lenses have helped me kind of put a sharper point on some of this work that we've been doing for this city. And I should also say that we are backed up by our own team. We have Angelo Planning Group, who gave us some excellent advice on local processes, local projects, state laws, all sorts of things that they keep very close tabs on. We were also backed up by the Lillard Consulting Group, a market economist firm that is well regarded nationally and has been involved in lots of mixed use and housing projects in not just Portland, but other parts of the country as well. And we also had Pyatak Architects out of the Bay Area who specializes in mixed use and urban housing to give some very specific advice on certain topics. So we had a really good cross-section of disciplines, of perspectives, of ways of looking at this, this subject. But basically comes down to, we've got 19 recommendations. And some of them I view as low-hanging fruit that, in fact, the city staff has already taken some of them to heart and started to introduce some of these things that don't require legislative action, that are just administrative, managerial. And so it's been great to see that as we've been sort of teasing these things out that would help, they've already been, nobody's waiting. They're, it's not sequential. It seems to be already taken to heart, and things are changing, but some do require legislative action, and it would require also some more thorough examination. We took a pretty in-depth stab at some of these things, but that's always subject to refinement and nuances and things that would just look at it from maybe a slightly different lens. But the first one does have to do with the thresholds for review. And what I found interesting about this was that all of us, I think, when we look at the urban scene and changes in the urban scene, we tend to gravitate toward the new buildings because they are new, and they're often bigger, and they're in your face, and they often occupy a lot of land area, and they start to change the fabric of a community. But as Laura pointed out from her charts, it's in fact not the biggest source of reviews. When you add additions and alterations, those by far overshadow the number of sort of totally new buildings. And so realizing that, that was sort of the bulk, we then drilled down a bit and realized that through some additional analysis of data, that what was often choking the system up, so to speak, was a vast array of smaller projects that were just bogging things down. They were being sort of given the same scrutiny as all the other projects that had far greater impact. And wouldn't it therefore be fruitful to maybe look at a way of carving that back and just letting go of some of the smaller aspects of urban change and really focusing on the big guys? Because some of the big guys were even escaping the system. Depending on where they weren't getting any design review scrutiny. So it was kind of hitting both ends of the spectrum. Could we reduce the level of effort for the smaller end of the spectrum and focus on the larger, more impactful projects? And so that's sort of the root of, if you look at the three charts for new projects, new development, additions and alterations, you'll see that we have sort of dropped smaller projects out of the design. That doesn't mean they don't get scrutiny. Obviously, they're going to have to comply with building code, zoning code, the basic zoning standards, but they don't have to go through that other step. So that in itself, when we did the analysis, and it took a lot of, as I'm sure you can imagine, a lot of rocking back and forth. Where do we set the cut points? Where do we split off this stuff? And we started with some arbitrary numbers. Well, it kind of feels right. Did the analysis, wasn't making any difference, about the same number. Well, that's not gonna, that has no impact. Then we kind of went to the other, well, what if we really change the numbers? And then it was like very little was going through scrutiny. So we kept rocking back around until it seemed like it was balancing out, where we were seeing a significant reduction, enough to make a difference, and roughly 20%, that's the total, aggregate total, of 20% reduction in the number going through special review. And that then would lighten up time by staff, time by commission, and loosen the system up, the process up a bit to really focus on the more meaty projects. It does mean letting go of some of the smaller end of the spectrum. We've kind of backtracked a little bit, and I think your letter addresses this. We realized there was a much longer tradition of looking at all projects within downtown, and I think you identified that too. And so we kind of revised, okay, in downtown, maybe then even still the smaller ones get scrutiny. So, but one of the bigger things was this was almost a revelation that Gateway, has been treated as a major growth center in all of the policies, and it's been treated essentially equal to the central city in some regulatory regard. And it's just not there yet. It's, as you know, it's not getting a huge amount of new development. It will eventually come, but it's not there yet. What is happening is there's a lot of very modest, low scale, low investment stuff going on. People are remodeling buildings. They want to put in little markets. They want to put in new restaurants. And that's expected in any kind of an area like that. So we ended up just cutting out that stuff essentially from not making everything in Gateway, no matter what it is, go through that special review through the commission. So it still will get, depending on the size, it still would get some review, but it's being sort of treated now a little differently than before. So the whole intent of this, adjusting the thresholds, was to, reduce that amount, the sheer volume, and to allow people who are being given that task to really concentrate on the projects that truly cause major impact for Portland neighborhoods. So that's essentially it. I think there still could be some nuances on that. I think you brought up in your letter the notion, well, aren't there some other cases where you might want review? Good, that would take a big exercise. What are they sensitive, especially sensitive areas that might be added back in? That's not really the scope that we had, but it's a good exercise to look at. So that's where we are. And if we wanted to stop there with any thoughts or questions about that.
So, since I'm not seeing anybody jump in, one of the points in our letter to council, and this was really yours, Eli, was that Central City we think of as downtown, but when you really look at a map, includes, let's say, parts of the Central East Side. And I think Eli brought a fabulous point where, especially let's say the eastern edge of the Central East Side, what really starts to be a very different type of development, perhaps warrants looking at it differently than the rest of Central City, and should be considered in how those threshold breaks or where those threshold breaks happen, or maybe what the requirements are for those areas. I think there's a couple different ways to go about it, but I thought it was an excellent point myself, Eli. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think it would take some, we're not able to do that now, but I think in a subsequent step of implementation, that could be looked at. It would take a much finer cut of analysis to determine, because you want to be fair, you want to have some very clear criteria. Somebody's going to ask, well, why did they have to, why do I have to go through it and the next person didn't down the street? And there questions are going to come up a lot. So you better have a really good answer of why somebody's in the requirement and somebody's out of the requirement. And so that's going to take some time to do. It's going to take some research on the ground, going to take looking at zoning maps, property lines. It's not going to be, a simple thing to just invent a number, invent a criteria. So, you may need to build a case for that, of why there's some categories that are, different.
Well, I'm a little bit, perhaps on the other side of that, is that I'm not sure what the case is that you would treat what I think of as downtown the same as you would treat some of those east side areas or Goose Hollow or some areas like that are part of Portland's very large central city. And luckily, we already have some districts designated within the central city. Either 7 or 11, someone with planner would know. They're 10, okay, somewhere in there. That it might be possible to say we already have some defined areas. Which of these are downtown that get the highest level of protection, and which of these get treated in the what's currently labeled out? They'd still get design review, but it would be at the level that is currently applicable to areas outside of the prime spot.
Any other kind of comments on thresholds? Yes, Gary.
I really appreciate the need for thresholds and to take some of the burden away from the smaller properties that are being mostly remodeled rather than built anew. But there was discussion in the subcommittee about the idea that you could get an accumulation of buildings with bad design through that approach. And I'm wondering if there are voluntary guidelines or voluntary or any other mechanism to try to move that development in the direction that's supportive of the three major tenets of community design, but without producing a regulatory barrier. I mean, Is that making sense?
Yeah, I mean, given your state law, it kind of forces you into the two choices. And I wish there were another, this is a unique state, and it's the only state that we are aware of that has that aspect.
Well,
But it does kind of set that duality up.
could you not say, Mark, which I guess we tried to address somewhat that point, that we think it's important that the work on the community design standards and the community design guidelines be done as a part of the analysis of that threshold for just some of the smaller things drop out. So again, if some of the base code could take care of it, or
Yeah,
some of the,
right.
the track
Mhm,
that's
yeah.
that's non-discretionary takes care of the community concerns and still supports perhaps unique corridor neighborhood development, then I think it gets at what you're asking about.
Yeah, I think
Or
the-
might, hopefully, if it's done right.
Yeah, I think the underlying concern is that if there's no action, if there's total exemption on the low cost or small remodeling, it could lead to kind of a downward spiral in design, and not what we want is an upward spiral. And but I understand real clearly that a strict regulatory approach is in itself a barrier to any redevelopment in those areas. And I'm thinking about Gateway and other parts of East Portland specifically.
Now, one of the things that was, I thought fascinating, we had an opportunity in several locations to hear from very small family-owned businesses. And they are not like the developer that's doing it over and over again, that has attorneys, has engineers, has architects, has an army of people behind them. They're familiar with the process. They can work through it. They don't always maybe do it well, but they at least know the system because of repetition. And there's a whole cadre of people that do it once in their life. And it is their life investment, their life savings, and that's on the line. And they're usually at the very small end. It's a couple or a single, and this is the one big thing they're going to do in their life. And it is sometimes heartbreaking to hear the stories where, I mean, they have been run through, in some cases, a ringer for the smallest kind of just want to convert a storefront into a market, a little neighborhood market. I mean, okay, so maybe there's 5 in a row that are not well done, that are all just a little off, but you know, that's part of your personality too. Everything that isn't slick and clean and dressed up and, you know, ready for the party. You've got a lot of funky stuff here. That's part of what some people just, they don't have that kind of aesthetic, but it's kind of part of your DNA, is that you have a lot of folks that just want to do weird stuff. Is that a problem? I mean, should everything be designed by an architect, be straight-laced and, all ordered out? I mean, I personally don't care if somebody wants to, for a 50 feet length of storefront, to put up corrugated plastic awning. Maybe that's just fine. You don't have to fuss over the brackets and the material and the durability and all that stuff. It's going to go away in probably 10 or 15 years anyway, because somebody will redevelop it. So it's just sort of an attitudinal thing. You also want to nurture what is sort of a homegrown collective personality of people being able to put their handprint, however good or bad it is, on a building or a property. And I think it's just good to let go a little bit of that and just to live with the occasional, like, what? What were they thinking? That's kind of okay, I think. Yeah.
Well, I absolutely agree with that attitude and appreciate that the buildings we love in Portland were almost all built without any design review process at all. And on the thresholds page, which is where most of my comments are, the small things I have is one is to make 5,000 or less be the threshold, because we have lots of 5,000 square foot lots for one of the criteria. Instead of right now, it's 5,000 or more is where it kicks in. And another is to look at the 55-foot height limit, because in our CM mixed-use zone category, you can actually get a few feet higher than that with the affordable housing bonus to the first floor lift. And I think that we should cue this up to one of the most common zoning designations we have in these zones. This is some detail that can happen later, but I'll put it out there right now.
Yep.
And in the broader picture, I am really overall encouraged by this set of recommendations. I wish we could go faster on them. But the 3 tenets, I think, is a great way of Am I segueing too fast to this one, or should we do more? Are we doing by threshold areas?
That is later,
Someone-
I
that's the
think
next
we are
page.
talking about it
but-
later.
I will hold off.
Okay.
That's my, I did see in this most recent version of the report that I'm not understanding the eligible for two-track columns check boxes there. So a little maybe discord on just understanding what's presented there, because in my understanding, we always have two tracks if we're outside the central city, unless we want, so anyway, a little bit of clarity on that might be helpful, at least in describing it. And, but there were a couple items here. In the past version, there was no review on, or just community design standards review, and now there is some review with
Right,
smaller
right,
projects.
right.
So
Brought some
perhaps
back.
this is the balancing you're
Yep.
at balancing act you were describing. And I probably tend to more towards the prior version of it, where there's more projects with the reign to experiment at the small scale than there would be under this one.
So, do we want to move to the next
Go
one?
ahead and move on. It'd be great.
One of the things, I'm not sure Laura mentioned this in her list of people we talked to, but we did hear good and loud and clear from community folks. We had several meetings at lots of community representatives, and they had stuff to say. And so they were not shy about talking about this. But one of the things that we kind of immediately teased out of that was that however Portland has nurtured community involvement, it has not kept pace with other cities in this regard of design review being well sort of noticed to the public. That you do put up, your staff does put up these little placard things on a stick, but that goes back 50 years plus. I mean, that's nothing new. People have been doing that for a long time. Most urbanizing areas really announce the project. I mean, just right. You pass it on foot, you pass it in a car, and you see a sign that announces a change that's imminent. And what we've detected is that a lot of people they're either they're not seeing the thing because we're in the weeds or whatever, but they're surprised when the construction fences go up. I mean, like, that isn't the time to learn about a project. So we think that having more obvious announcements of a project that give clear information and contact information in a not necessarily a marketing rendering, but a site plan that gets even more information. So you really know that something's proposed for this location is fair. And then by the same time, and other cities have experienced this too, where you now have a significantly higher proportion of renters. Well, the old school almost comes out of the old way back in U.S. history where only the people that own property got the right to vote. You only notify property owners. Well, then renters never hear about it. So it's not that you have to name the renter. You can put on the envelope, Postal Service does it, it's occupant or it's resident or it's any number of other terms that they use, and they just drop it in the box. Now, it doesn't mean everybody's going to read it, but at least it gets greater coverage to people who aren't owning property, that are there and living in that neighborhood and helping build it, and they get to know about this too in a personal piece of mail. Not just reading it in the paper, reading a neighborhood blog, but they get the notice. And that's just a fair thing to do. I mean, just really fair. So there are some, we've got a little bundle here of things that we think would help in the process, not the least of which is just give a little more organization and touching up of how applicants are responsible for getting out there and meeting with folks and seeing what their concerns are and what the record is of that, so that it isn't just a hit or miss and, well, did they pay attention to it? And there's a sort of social compact here that an applicant should have the responsibility to reach out to those folks and describe it clearly and listen. Doesn't mean they have to do everything that, that group wants. Certainly not lower the density or lower, get rid of some entitlement thing. But that they should accurately report that and get it in the record so it's known. But then, on the other hand, the neighborhood has to be organized too. It can't just be like three people that are the loudest voice speaking. What are you representing? What is your group? Who is it? Everybody needs to have a little more discipline in this process. So It's fair and open and accountable and transparent, and people know what's going on. They know how to interact with it legitimately, what's on the table, what's not on the table. And I think if people know that, if they know what they can affect, their influence is greater. If they know they can't reduce the density of a project, then it's not going to be talked about. But what about the design of it? How is it reflecting the neighboring building? How is it, matching the neighborhood context? All sorts of other issues, real meaty, focus on those. But we're not talking about these are not on the table. And let's just make that clear. And I think that's a fair thing for everybody to know what the rules of the game are. And I liken it to a kindergarten room, where if you don't have rules, that's, the teacher's laying down, everybody bounces off the walls. And they don't get anything done. It's just chaos. So have some rules, have some simple rules of the road for everybody to pay attention to and know what their responsibilities are. And so it's just a little loose end thing here that I don't think has been kind of nurtured. You've got some good aspects, but it just hasn't had a set of finer points put on it, I think. And it needs that.
Go ahead, Chris.
So as a former neighborhood association officer, I appreciate the suggestions for improving community involvement. A little intrigued by the increased mail notices suggestion. My millennial stepchildren do not read snail mail. I mean, it just piles up in a folder in the house and they never get around to it. What are the thoughts about best practice on the internet, social media? How do we do community involvement in that sphere? I know a few years ago, there was a very briefly lived service that would email you building permit notices within 1,000 feet of where you lived, or you could set some threshold or something, but that doesn't seem to have stuck. Are there tools like that that would help people engage online and get to the relevant audience?
You want to speak? I think the city is looking into some of those, just how practical they are, how usable, how effective they are. But actually, the cool thing is that you've got this private sector tool of the Next Portland, which he digs up stuff from every single thing going on. I mean, it's like crazy.
Right, but he's not local to a neighborhood, he's citywide, so.
But it could be something that references just a simple source or a city source or whatever, but it's, I think it could be done. It's just take some work to look at it. IT kind of folks can we set up something like that?
Well, I mean, even in the social media realm, there's now Nextdoor, which is very neighborhood focused. I mean, that could be a channel.
Yeah.
So this is it's kind of a minor point, but I'm curious if you have strong feelings by the way you worded this recommendation about the applicant being required to take notes and submit them. And as somebody who's been in the shoes of actually both the neighborhood and the applicant, what I can tell you is, miscommunication happens all the time. You think you heard one thing and they really meant another. So I guess I would kind of be curious as to why the neighborhood association shouldn't be required to provide minutes, and maybe they're both required. I don't know. Just so that it's they're on record with this is really what we thought we said versus what the applicant thought they heard.
Yeah, it's just that's such a potentially it's such a trap. You could just go back and forth and back disputing who heard what and how many people said that. And,
well, you're going to have it in the hearing anyway.
But I mean, there could be a variety of ways of providing that kind of more disciplined approach, and it could be too something coming from the neighborhood. I mean, if they're going to have a meeting, then put it down what they talked about and what their conclusions were.
I felt like it might put more strength into the neighborhood association.
Sure.
To have. It's just kind of like their letter to Design Commission about what they said.
But I think it's also, buried in this is a bunch of smaller things, but I think incumbent upon the neighborhood associations to make sure that they are truly representative. It isn't just single-family white homeowners.
Very true.
And got to work on that. Got to make sure they're renters. Got to make sure they're older folks. Got to make sure there's a big spectrum. And it means outreaching and doing some work to bring in more voices.
Well, it's local businesses too.
Right, and businesses, So I think it's fair. I mean, everybody needs to do business a little differently.
Very true. Eli?
Can someone tell me where the charter is housed? I've just been it's not in section, I couldn't find it in section 33, just looking now, but I remember at our joint meeting, someone quoting the authority of the Design Commission. Does someone know where that sits?
Not the charter, but I think the Design Commission, what their purview is in the 800s. I'm going to look back.
I just, oh, in the 800s, I just looked in the 700s and saw their,
But there's not a charter. I'm going to turn around again. This awkward microphone move. No charter, or by, yeah. So if you were looking for one, there isn't one.
well, I was just looking at 700, and it's got a section where it discusses the review bodies, one of which is the Design Commission, and it outlines their role. And it's very general. It doesn't include some of the language that we were read at the joint meeting describing these are the areas that they can weigh in. So I'm realizing I don't know where that came from in terms of process. So that, therefore, I don't know whether if we're going to
Where
make
are
any
you?
adjustments. I'm looking in 77, a second here. Sorry, 33.710.050 in the. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll look there.
That's right.
Okay.
825. Yeah.
So any more additional comments on community involvement? Nope. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
The next one is just having, we have the recommendation for implementing these bundle of things from 1 through 5, and then on an annual basis, monitor and evaluate what happened. Did it get better? Did it improve? Were people more satisfied with the process? Doesn't mean everybody has to be satisfied, but what was the outcomes of this? And then add that to the report that the Design Commission gives annually, called the State of Design. And that should be just a little mini report that is done by staff or maybe a third party again, and just say, did these make a difference? And the reason why that's important is that a number of people have jumped to number 7 saying that's the magic bullet. Let's just set up another commission. We think there's so many improvements that can be made to the process before you elect to do that. Let's see if these work. Let's see what these things do. And if they're not doing as much as everybody thinks they should be doing, then maybe go to 7. It's not unusual to find cities having more than one body looking at design, but we think if you at least take these other steps first, then you'll be armed with good information. And you've got a before and after case, and it'll let you decide. Is it necessary to have a second commission, or is the process now better? So I guess that's the key. Let's put a point on that at the end of a year or two or both, and then think about what subsequent actions might be necessary.
And I flagged this one because I added to it, and I didn't have a chance to talk about this at the subcommittee level, let alone at the broader PSC level. But if there's going to be a formalized process where design commissions reporting to city council, I was thinking it'd be a great opportunity to have them report back to us so that we can talk about the synergies between our work, their work, and what we can do to help them and vice versa. Especially since we've lost that member that used to sit on the design commission, so we don't really have that connection. So it just seemed like a great opportunity to encourage a dialogue between the two commissions. And if people are supportive of that, then we could leave that in here. I kind of threw it in and wanted to make sure that I wasn't just making it up without any support. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah. I wonder, is there, in your experience and expertise, is there a role for predefined metrics for this evaluation? I'm concerned that in many projects where I've been involved in evaluation and it's kind of free-form retrospective, people will say, yes, things have changed and generally it's better. But I'm wondering if what's become very popular in medicine and public health, which is my area of expertise, is to say, here's what we expect to happen, here's a metric which we think represents whether that is happening, and have that predefined, and then you go in the future and you look back and say, okay, is that metric moving? It's not the only thing you should be looking at, but is there, in the design area, is there
I
anything
don't
like
know
that?
I don't know that there's a best practices that has addressed that. However, in getting to these points, we did use some metrics, and they could be reused. They were in terms of numbers of days, numbers of returned trips back to the commission. There were some, there were some things that were helpful in this process. So those same metrics could be used. But I think that it's also possible to sit down and maybe come up with 2 or 3 others that might get at some of the other touch points, like the neighborhood aspect. How many people responded, or how many people showed up, or did it include more voices? I mean, there are some things that could be additionally developed, but there's also sort of a qualitative aspect that's hard to put numbers to, and that may not be as easy to put in it just, and some of that, because this is about building not just projects, but building neighborhoods, some of that doesn't even show up for a while, because the building needs to be finished, it needs to be occupied, it needs to be engaged in the neighborhood, it needs to be tenanted, and that can take several years. So some of the stuff is not going to even be immediately apparent. Is it making a difference? So that's why I mean, personally, I would not count on the first year being that revealing. It would take at least a couple of development years to see if it was everything was kind of moving in a better direction.
Yeah.
That's my view.
And I'm very supportive of qualitative measurement. That, to me, is a metric. But I still have the question of whether it makes sense to lay something out that says, we expect to be moving in the following direction.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well, one metric right away that I would suggest is the number of appeals. That would be a clear one. Because other cities that have straightened, kind of reorganized their process to engage everybody better, the appeals just drop, just practically zero. I mean, it's a real rare thing that goes to appeal. Because everybody feels that they've been heard fairly, there's a process that's open, that there's authority put in that decision. And so it changes that. And that's certainly one obvious metric.
Thanks.
Oh, go ahead, Katie.
I wanted to ask, and I was thinking that this measurement change would maybe be the place, but maybe it isn't. But in terms of Gateway, you were recommending that Gateway not have, in a way, you're saying delaying the design overlay. Is that what you're kind of saying?
No, what we're saying is that still, bigger projects would get, but lighten up on that, not forcing everything that goes on out there to go through
Okay.
An elevated form of scrutiny.
So it's
Just so that-
basically the thresholds would just be high in Gateway.
Uh,
Is that what you mean? I mean, I guess I don't understand.
Right
I keep thinking
now-
I understand, but I'm not
Right.
sure I do.
Right now, the Central City and Gateway are the only 2 areas in the city that are required to go through discretionary design review, so they don't have that clear and objective track open to them through the zoning code, those 2 columns that I showed earlier. So they only can use, just like Central City, they can only use that discretionary track. So it's either a type 2 with staff land use review or a type 3 with the design commission. And so Mark's recommendation is to allow Gateway to, like the rest of the city that was shown in blue on that map, that has design overlay, except for the Central City, to be able to use the clear and objective track, because right now they can't.
Okay.
So they would still have design overlay, and they would still be required to go through extra regulations, but that's not through a land use review.
Okay. That is more understandable.
So it'd be in keeping with the rest of the city.
Right, and so would that change over time?
Sure, good.
And
possible.
what would make that change?
Well, I would say when it started to transform into something that was envisioned by that designation. Isn't there yet. It may be maybe 5 years off or 10 years off, but at that point, it could be rethought, and maybe then it gets put back into that or adjusted in some other way. But right now, almost nothing is happening in that vein, so it's kind of overkill. It's kind of applying an overpowered tool to fairly modest change.
But I just have this funny feeling it's going to flip pretty quickly when it does. Is that true?
Possible.
You're kind of like not agreeing.
I'm not seeing much
Your
evidence
face.
of that yet,
Yeah,
but
okay.
I still think it's a few years off. I mean, there's so many other opportunities to develop intensely in the city that I think that is still, there's too much raw stuff out there for people to be wanting to put in huge, redevelopment efforts in that. That's sort of my just observation. We weren't asked to make a whole study of the Gateway area, but especially in talking with a number of the folks out there, that seemed to be a common frustration on their part, that they're trying to do some investment to elevate it, but they get kind of smacked back. And it's keeping them from doing it. In some cases, they want to avoid it now, which means they're just putting up a sign when they could be redoing the storefront, they could be adding planting, they could be, but as soon as they touch that area, it now blows up into this whole big ordeal.
Okay, thanks.
So,
Go ahead. Next one.
now we're going to shift to,
That was all on the process, yeah.
Pardon? Yeah, I guess, is everybody comfortable with kind of adding the joint meetings with Design Commission? Great. Thank you, Julie.
the first one on this list has to do with clarifying and revising the purpose and scope of the de-overlay. It's just time to do that. It's been around long enough. It's still not abundantly clear all of the things that it's supposed to be accomplishing, and maybe it's trying to accomplish too much. But to just rethink it and reaffirm it, make sure that it's hitting the right points, it's addressing the right issues, and simplifying some of the terminology is not easily understood by some of the participants, especially maybe some of the neighborhood groups. It's just there's a lot of sort of rough edges around it. I think it really could be made a lot clearer and a lot more evident what is going on, what it's trying to do, and it's not that big of, I don't think it's that huge of a fix to address it, but it's time to give it a refresh. And so that's basically the point of just elevating it and scudding it and fine-tuning it on that. And also actually making sure that people understand, because there is some language in the code that suggests that the design commission has the authority. It's not clear, it's just vague. I mean, back when we were all writing this stuff, 20, 30 years ago, and trying to put these things together, people were just loose with their language. And, they threw in something, I'm sure came out of a discussion, said height and bulk. Well, that's a very specific zoning terminology. And usually that falls into the realm of entitlements, it falls into the realm that people need to count on that's a quantitative, lawful thing that you're talking about. It isn't just something that you can discuss and, well, maybe that should be 3 stories instead of 5. I mean, it opens the door to some confusion about what the design review process is supposed to be doing. And so maybe some stuff is getting rid of some of the vague language because it makes for misunderstanding that way.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that? I think we're pretty supportive of that. The only other thing that I didn't see in your recommendations, would be curious on your thoughts about, is, and I haven't seen it happen very often, but not only discussions about bulk and height, which I think we see probably more often in historical districts than Central City, but discussions about additional, and I'm going to make sure I'm clear, setbacks versus step backs, which I would say are in the design guidelines right now, but I don't believe we have language, and I could be wrong, that says design, well, except for the fact that we have the overarching comment that they kind of do have this purview. But it just seems to me that setbacks are another kind of one to hold the line on as a zoning code provision versus discretionary.
Right. I mean, there are some cities that in their own processes it's sort of a middle ground. They allow for some modest amount of discretionary adjustment, but not like a big shift away from it. Like if somebody could come up with a compelling reason why the setback would work at 9.5 feet rather than 10, that's okay. They can give that, they have that latitude. I don't know if you want to go there, but some places do that. Or if the building works just a little better by 2.5 more feet, nobody would notice that. It's sometimes called de minimis. Commissions are given that latitude to do that. So whether or not you want to go there, I think it's better to make it clear, a crisp, clear line, bright line between the quantitative measures of development so people can absolutely know what they can get, and sort of the more, other qualitative measures. But there are other options that you can consider.
Go ahead, Eli.
So I found, thanks for the code reference. I did find it here. The current factors available for review by Design Commission include architectural style, structural placement, dimensions, height and bulk, lot coverage by structures, and exterior alterations of the proposal, including building materials, color, off-street parking areas, open areas, landscaping, and tree preservation. So that list does include a mix of aesthetic items and very quantitative items. And I fully agree with the recommendation to clarify which things go through design. If people are angry about what's being built in the neighborhood, whether it's too small or too big, who do they come to? I think they come to us probably, but right now they're certainly going to Design Commission as well, probably. We get a lot of those comments as well. And I think it would be helpful for the clarity of the public process for citizens, and also so City Council doesn't have to be the arbiter on these issues to clarify it. Thanks.
Go ahead. Next one.
Okay,
Thanks,
the
Mark.
last one is this, which you brought up before, the 3 tenants. We thought it would be good to focus the review on 3 key subjects. And these are not new. There's nothing new about this. It's just sort of getting the focus measured and directed, and that these are meant to be 3 equally treated subjects. That there has tended to be, from my observations of the Design Commission at least, a kind of overdosing on the third one, and translating the quality and permanence aspect into a lot of discussion about specific materials, ways of connecting materials together, the exact finishes, the manufacturer's specs, just a lot of discussion on that end of the spectrum. There's nothing particularly wrong about that, except it needs to be balanced out with an equal discussion on the other 2. And I was seeing and attending some of the meeting, just an immediately almost like grappling, like going right to that at the outset. And some people are passionate about that. They want to make sure that these are buildings that will last 50 years, 100 years, whatever. But I think the other 2, really, we're starting, I think, as I go around, we looked at 70 projects. I began to notice that some of the projects, while they may have been scrutinized in detail for their materials, were failing on some of the public realm aspects. I mean, they're just like not good at all at the street level. I mean, just not good at all. I mean, sometimes really gross stuff. I mean, how did that get overlooked? Did it just not get discussed? Was it not drawn? Was it not asked about? And it's, obvious stuff. Doors that are blanked off and no storefront windows, or utility structures that are right out front and center, or, weird things going on, or just nothing happening at the street level at all except sheer glass. Nothing that's friendly, touchable, like you have developed over the many decades of nurturing good urban development. And so it just seemed like, let's readjust this. These things are important. There are a lot of people are willing to, pay attention to this, but let's give these things focus, give them equal focus, not jump right to the last thing and beat it to death. But let's look at what are the responsibilities of having this building fit into its neighborhood and contribute to it in a multitude of ways that builds that neighborhood and respects. It doesn't mean copying stuff. It doesn't mean being always traditional. It doesn't mean, always using wood or something on the ground floor. It means just spending time looking at what's going on in the neighborhood. What are the influences? What are the directions? What are the factors? What are the trends? What are the things that are good? What are the things that are bad? What would you want to reinforce? What would you want to get rid of? And spending some thoughtful time on that. I just was not, I was seeing less of that happening, and it seemed like a missing gap, and it's starting to show up on the ground.
Go ahead, Teresa.
So given that it's missing, how do you propose that you instill those abilities and questions into?
Right, right. Well, it begins to feed into the other, whatever, 6 or 7 there, that when these subjects are recrafted, rewritten, condensed, rethought, that you go back to this and make sure that there is language that addresses those and gives people some direction in those areas. And one example that I point out, sometimes it's just what you ask for. I mean, the submittals. Ask for an analysis of the neighborhood. What did you see? Show us in pictures. Show us in sketches. Show us in diagrams. Do some homework. It's like, again, another metaphor or analogy is the grade school teacher. You don't just show me the answer. Show me how you got to the answer. I want to see your thought. Because I'm not sure how you got that answer. Why did you get there? I want to see how, what your thought process was. Maybe it's a really good answer. Maybe there's another answer that's even better. Let's see what occurred to you in that thought process.
So you're indicating to create a more specific form
Yes.
for design submittal that will guide people to
Right,
bring in
exactly.
the answers, and then
Right,
the
right.
questions will get discussed.
Yep.
I'm using a lot of airtime here. Sorry. I think that this is identifying these as 3 tenets is a fantastic way of naming what is this squirrel we're chasing on the discussion. What are we trying to achieve in it? So I really like the 3-tenet list. And if I could convince the Planning Commission to go with this, I would suggest that the public realm is more important than the other ones. That's where we interact with buildings, the first few stories. That's where Design Commission can weigh in to make sure we have excellent walkable, bikeable streets people actually want to walk down and bike down, and go in and out of buildings and have interesting on the facade. And when we try and adjust our base codes, we look to that also. We care a lot about, in the multi-dwelling code update, what the first few stories of a building look and feel like. So I would actually go so far as to suggest we prioritize these and say public realm is number 1, context is number 2, and quality and permanence would be number 3 in terms of our public interest as residents interacting with all these spaces.
So this was another one I took a little liberty on in the letter to my subcommittee members, but also, and I kind of did it probably in different places, not just here throughout the letter, where your report was well done, Mark, and it made me put a new lens to kind of thinking through the recommendations in a reminder of tying back to the comprehensive plan. And I think sometimes in our discussions we got, I can speak for myself, just got lost in having been through the process, kind of expressing things that I've seen versus putting my PSC hat on and kind of going, no, we've got goals here that we're trying to forward with our climate action plan, our comprehensive plan. So thank you for doing a thorough job in reminding us of that. So I guess this is kind of another of those checkpoints for me with the letter, because I started to say, well, perhaps those tenants, as a PSC commission, we would kind of challenge a thinking of how do those tenants tie back to what we're trying to achieve in the comprehensive plan, and making sure that as that's thought about in the future that we're moving those goals forward. So I guess one thing is just, do I have any concerns with that as a commission that I've taken that liberty? I'm not seeing anybody raise their hands. And then this is more just a kind of commentary, and many people have heard me probably say this before. And it's been a real aha moment for me because I've recently been in front of the Historic Landmarks Commission and the Design Commission at the same time. Quality and permanence is so subjective. It seems kind of like it's not, but it is. So, for example, you could argue quality is how long something lasts, but yet, and I'll pick on vinyl windows. I love to pick on vinyl windows. They'll last a long time. They're pretty energy efficient. Some people think they're quality, some people don't. that's where you kind of get subjective, perhaps. So I guess what I'm putting, what's the definition of quality for the purposes of review? Yet Historic Commission, and here's one that's interesting, to them quality is all the intricate detail that comes with expressing how buildings used to be put together within their historic time period. And it seems like when they're using their language of quality, they're looking for a response that's more pointed that way. So I guess making sure that when we put something like quality and permanence out, that it's kind of clear what we're trying to achieve. And it can still be quality and permanence, but I guess that's why I added that to the letter, is really understanding and defining those fairly broad subjective terms would be helpful if we're going to kind of leave them as one of our tenets.
Well, that is why that's in quotes. That's a subtle reason, because I think you could spend time with that. What does that all include? And I think it could include a lot more than what's being discussed today. It's kind of been narrowed down to just the material palette. And quality could be the craft, the detail, the artfulness, are there things going on here that are surprises and unexpected things, and not always maybe predictably architectural. There might be an opportunity for, I mean, one of the little thoughts, this is a sidebar, but one of the frustrations I've had as an urban designer is that I see in lots of cities the desire to have canopies over the sidewalk. You see that here. But what that does is it creates this horizontal datum line across the entire length of the project that's one solution, fitting all of the diverse tenants that might be in there. And that's kind of deadening. I mean, that's really not, if you look at older buildings, they weren't all designed with the same, every storefront had a different expression that reflected the delight of that business. They came up with a design. So is there another way of getting there with that? Could you have an escrow fund set aside where each tenant had a pot of money to use, rather than the architect coming up with one sort of singular expression? And let that be a little more playful than it is now. Now we're seeing all of these things marching around the city. They're frankly boring. And why would you want that? So it's just one indication of a different take on quality. Another one could be an equity issue. Yeah, are there opportunities did you provide opportunities for a very small startup business to be in this building? All they need is 500. Where's a tenant space that's 500 square feet and they're paying, a modest amount for their rent? That could be an aspect of quality, in my view, because it adds to the richness of the neighborhood and opens up economic opportunities for folks. And right now, it's just one in undifferentiated space where the broker wants to sell it to a bank or something. It's like, you're not getting the good stuff. Maybe there's some other ways of poking at the project and giving some obligation back to them to re-enrich the neighborhoods.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other additional thoughts? Do you guys have a wrap up, or should I wrap it up?
Just make.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Just you, Andre.
I appreciate your presentation. I think this is a brave new world we're going to head into. I really think it's important as we look at this, and I appreciate Kat saying the comp plan and the principles in the comp plan, because part of that is trying to get complete neighborhoods in areas that have not had that opportunity in the past. And the concern is, when you look at this bifurcation now into the smaller projects and we set a standard, governments tend to, when they think there's a standard, they tend to look away, because it means that if you do that, you don't have to monitor it. And the things you monitor are the things that are moving in terms of that require your response. And when you don't have that response, you kind of think, well, the developer's going to do the right thing and they're going to just plug along and do that. For low-income neighborhoods, that's not been probably their experience, because people come in, it's a low-cost area, and they tend to take advantage of those areas. And I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but I'm concerned that Portland doesn't refocus its attention to the shiny pennies being built at 200 feet or whatever, and we get to the gateways and say, oh, they've got a lower standard, we don't need to look at them as much and monitor them as much and put as much resources to them. And then at the end of the day, we end up with something that we can't extract from. It didn't lift that neighborhood. The social impact is not a positive impact because it's not going to take a lot of people to set a tone for a neighborhood in terms of how it's socially impacted. So I encourage this because, on the other hand, I think this is a great opportunity for those neighborhoods, the small developers, the small owners, to really redevelop, do the tenant improvements, and bring in things in terms of affordable businesses and do those things and connect. But we need to be vigilant, I guess.
Yep, I agree.
Eli?
I guess I'll make a proposal to revise the letter that's going to City Council tomorrow. In the last bullet point, discussing 3 tenants, just to prioritize public realm, heightening the public realm, and perhaps with the last sentence to, on Kat's point, provide more clarity on the meaning of quality and permanence.
So I would suggest adding something about a focus on continuing to focus on affordability and anti-displacement work into the letter. Like, this needs to also be looked into, seen in that context.
So if I'm writing on the fly, if you could work with me a little bit here, my guess is that would fit into B1, the purpose of the D overlay. And so part of the purpose is to further the comp plan goals of affordability, and I mean, would that be a way to kind of state that? I'm trying to put words in your mouth, and don't
Yeah,
want to do that, Maggie.
But it says only the design goals of the comprehensive plan.
Right, so
you
add,
definitely
that's what I'm
adjust
asking.
that,
So, and would you say, can you
that-
help me with some wording for you?
Yeah, so this needs to meet the goals of the meet comprehensive plan goals around affordable housing and anti-displacement.
And I don't have an issue with that, just want to throw out, or are we really just trying to say all the comprehensive plan goals and not call it just the design goals? Or do you want to specifically call that out?
I would say all
mean,
of them, but specifically
of them.
call out affordable housing and anti-displacement because it gets lost. It always does.
discussion on them?
I mean, I definitely support it. I am having a little difficult time of figuring out how that fits within this context, though. Like, it just seems like it's like, oh, let's just tack that on, but we don't have, I mean, in the study and in other places, there's no tie.
I do like the idea of all the goals, because I think design goals is very focused, and all the comprehensive goals get you there. Maybe you could, instead of saying housing or gentrification, you could say equity. Does that
With a
help you?
particular focus on equity.
Good,
Mm.
yeah.
Wordsmithing, I could say, reflect the design goals of the comprehensive plan, particularly those related to housing affordability.
And yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it just, I think some of the original conversations when we started looking at design standards, Kat, you even said you were concerned about the additional costs that associated with tacking that on. And I want to be sure, one, as we've heard, that it doesn't increase barriers for minority-owned businesses. It doesn't increase costs, and therefore eliminates even, I mean, affordable housing, market affordable housing, you know.
Gary?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little hesitant going in this direction around carving out affordable housing as the one policy element that we support, in that I'm not sure that we know what the cost implications of good design versus less than good design are. And I do believe there are pro-social aspects of good design, where there really is an equity issue, where people who require affordable housing should have high-quality neighborhoods, high-quality environments to live in. And I just, without a little bit more thought, I'm kind of hesitant to dive in there and start making those kinds of changes.
Chris?
I'm looking for the nexus as well, and I think I can see one, at the time of implementation, when we're setting thresholds and maybe looking at the map, it seems like that's when we should be applying an equity lens to make sure that we're advancing all of our goals, right? So I think the general concept of equity probably resonates more for me than trying to dive into specific effects, because, our crystal ball is cloudier than that. But I think if the letter now attempts, if the proposal now attempts to, sort of grab onto the design goals of the comp plan, we should put the equity goals right next to them and make sure they're both considered.
So I guess I have two comments. I'm still leaning more towards, I guess, for what it's worth, just all goals and making sure everything gets kind of put that lens on it. And I think what's maybe missing from this statement is we're missing the climate action plan, as I'm sitting here staring at this, right? So perhaps it's broadening it almost kind of to say the comprehensive plan and the climate action plan. But that's where I'm leaning. Go ahead, Eli. It looks like you were leaning in.
Well, I was
and then
giving an example
Maggie.
of perhaps a nexus. The reason Gateway seems to want to get out of this overlay has to do with people trying to do new development, probably includes housing in a relatively affordable part of the city that is being stymied by current design regulations, as we've heard from some stakeholders. So there might be some nexus there.
Go ahead, Maggie.
So I disagree that equity should be brought in at the end. I think it needs to be central, even as we would have gone through like that.
I would say alongside, not at the end.
Okay, it sounded like once we get some X, Y, and Z complete, then we'll bring in equity. So I would definitely, I would still elevate equity. We have a Portland plan that elevates it. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't do so in a letter. And I think the hard thing is, like, I think it's just like this discussion, like, what does design overlay have to do with equity? And I think that's on that's a responsibility of the city to really determine if there are negative or even positive equity implications to a design standard. And I don't want it to get lost.
Right, and I noticed, I started going through this design overlay zone assessment, the big fat part. And the first is a little study on that by Leyland Consulting Group. They looked at whether it added to the cost. So it's, they came to the conclusion that it didn't, although it's difficult to assess.
So I'm going to make one last point, and then I think probably need a show of hands on kind of how to go on this. I guess back to, I agree that equity is very important, Maggie, and we actually specifically call it out in other parts of the letter. I guess where I'm going is a comprehensive plan leaves it as a balance. It's written that way. It's in there, and it kind of, it's all about balancing the many things that are going to weigh into the work that we're moving forward with. So I guess that's kind of, again, why I'm really much more comfortable with myself saying it's the comprehensive plan. Whether we add the climate action plan or not, I'm kind of open for discussion. But for the moment, I guess I'd say let's leave that off. And can I just maybe get a show of hands for adding equity to the statement, in particular calling it out, and then we can figure out how to craft it from there. Well, I guess I'm starting with, do you want to specifically call out equity as a statement here? And we can kind of work it out. And if not, then I guess the next question is, so do you want to call out the entire comprehensive plan would be the next kind of thought on the process, yeah. So show of hands for wanting to specifically make mention or call out equity? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So,
But design and equity goals.
well, I guess I'd like to broaden it from design. I think we would then be saying to reflect the goals of the comprehensive plan with particular attention to equity.
That sounds good.
And the
And climate action.
Any other plans laying around?
Yeah, don't put something in front of our desk right now.
And I guess to that point, I would say reflect the goals of the climate action plan and the comprehensive plan with particular attention to equity.
Mhm.
Okay.
Both have equity in them.
Welcome to the sausage making, guys, Mark.
Can we have a little discussion on the public realm question, a little hands, or to see whether that's something people would like to highlight among the 3 tenants?
So I guess, and more particularly, the question is, do you want to suggest prioritization?
Yeah, I'm suggesting, and I don't feel like putting them all in like 3 rank order. I can back away from that idea, but I'm trying to get a statement in there indicating the particular importance of elevating the public realm among those 3 tenants.
So would you just put it at the top of the list? Is that what you mean?
Well, everything in the report currently says these are all equal. That's what the report says right now. So I'm thinking, particularly with the lack of definition on quality and permanence, and my perception that public realm is more important to the design of these buildings in terms of getting design input than the others, I feel like I'd like to not just say they're all equal, and say that one's particularly important.
Go ahead, Susan.
I just would differ in that when I looked at the report, I didn't think that they were all equal. I feel that they were the 3 considerations that they needed to be looked at, and that at each site, different ones are going to be more important than other ones. And there may be areas where a high-performance building is super important, and there may be places where, because of the context of it being maybe not a historic area, but a certain area that has a certain look, you want to be more, more consideration put on the context. So I would kind of, I'm not part of the commission. Y'all are. But when I read it, I didn't see that it was saying they were all equal. I was seeing that those were the 3 things that were very important that needed to be considered.
Additional comments or discussion? Gary?
Yeah, a similar thought to Susan, where I see these as the points of a triangle, and they interact with each other, and they interact differently in different environments and different situations. So I think the overall effect is to elevate the public realm, but it's not that, I don't think that concentrating on that one aspect necessarily gets you to that place. It's like, look, when there's a lot of work systems that talk about process, outcome, and relationship, and if you overemphasize any one of those, you end up with some distorted process that doesn't really serve the whole goal. So I think this is another one of those triangular relationships, and in some cases, context will be king. In other cases, public realm will be. In other cases, quality and permanence will have the major influence. So,
Any other thoughts on that? So maybe just show of hands for adding a prioritization of public realm. We've got 3. So that one does not pass. Any other comments or additions or changes to the letter? Susan?
I do want to also encourage that more than one of you can come, to where the report's going to happen and be able to have the conversation there. And do we know tomorrow I mean, this isn't a hearing, it's a report, but they're.
It's
they are
still a
taking-
hearing. Mhm.
but They are, yes, so they are taking testimony.
They're taking testimony.
And often, we've made a case that we don't want to have, a whole bunch of different opinions up there. But in this case, I think we should talk about how you want to do that testimony. And if you have an extra point, it's not like you're disagreeing with the entire thing, but you just want to make an additional point. Y'all should consider whether you want to allow that or not.
Yeah, I guess I'm comfortable with that. As far as I'm hearing, we're all supportive of the recommendation. It's just fine points of things that may, or additional things, thoughts. And so if someone wants to join me tomorrow, I'm very open to that.
3 o'clock.
Okay, no addition or thoughts on the letter? Any other kind of comments with regard to it, to the work? I'll say again, Mark, I think it's great work. It really came together well. I greatly appreciate, as I've already said, pulling it back to our broader goals that we're trying to accomplish in policies, and look forward to the work progressing as we move on in the years. Thank you for all of your hard work for the entire team. Know that you got a lot of different opinions throughout this community, and you took it all, and greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and attention on this.
And we are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.